guys. Welcome to Crafty Chat. My name is Nancy. We're back again for episode 2, and I have 2 other folks with me if you guys want to go ahead and introduce yourselves.
Hi, I'm Heidi.
And I'm Lucy. This is my first time joining Nancy and Heidi. I am a library tech, and I do a lot of crafty programs, some with Nancy and Heidi, a lot of the fiber art stuff with them. I do programs for kids at the library and a lot of story time. So that's my role at the library. As far as what I do for crafting on my own, I mostly knit. Occasionally I crochet. I've done a lot of needlepoint in the past, but I don't really pick that up anymore. And lately I've sort of been trying to do some more paper arts, but mostly knitting. And I sew occasionally, but my sewing machine is in my office right now.
Oh no.
So I have time when I could be sewing, and I don't have it. Yeah. So
of all the times not to have a sewing machine, that was mine. Had a really bad jam last week, and it took me 2 hours to fix it. And I had this running thought through my head of like, God, please don't break. This will be the worst time for you to break. But no, we invited Lucy in to come and talk with us because she's done a lot of programming with us, and we were Heidi and I wanted to bring in some other creators and other creatives at the library to kind of showcase a little bit of what we're doing and kind of bring folks in on conversations that we've already had and things that we've already talked about to get different perspectives. I think this week, because this is episode 2, last week we talked a little bit about projects that we were working on currently. So we're going to do a little bit of talking about that right now. I'll go ahead and get started with that. I made a little bit of progress on the tote bag that I mentioned last week. So I got the outside sewn together, and it's very large, but there's the outside. Put my initials on it, and then it just needs the it needs the inside still. So the insides it folds down, but this is the front of one of the pockets, and then there's another pocket there, and there'll be one more short one in front. So that'll all go on the inside of the bag. And then that's pretty much all I've been working on. The only other thing that I did was I made these eye patch things for my brother. He's having treatment right now for eye cancer, and he needed patches for eye packs or ice packs for his eyes after treatment. So I've made several of these for him so that he doesn't have to he has like 7 or 8 of the little ice packs, and he wanted more of them too, so he wouldn't have to switch them out. So I made 3 more, 2 Star Wars, and then 1 just kind of like a dragon scale.
Because we now have 2 cats, which we got on Tuesday, so that was another major distraction. So.
I saw your pictures online, and they're both very cute. And
they're
I'm
very sweet,
excited
and they're sleeping right now, which is great.
Okay.
Are they babies?
They're 1-year-old.
Okay.
Yeah.
Aww.
And they were like, I think they're siblings. They look very different in size and color and all that stuff, but they're definitely buddies. They, Simon is the boy, he grooms Sheila, and they play fight a little bit, but other than that, they're just really cuddly. They'll eat off the same plate together. I mean, it's just ridiculous in a way how lovey they are. So
I'm hoping for lots more pictures of them.
I did finish weaving one book. I didn't finish because I still have to weave in my ends, but I was playing around with weaving on the cardboard loom, and I made a bookmark, of course, because that's what I do. Everything is a bookmark in my world.
The most practical thing.
Yeah. How about you, Lucy?
Well, I have like 3 different knitting things that I've been working on. The one is called the Retreat Shawl, and you can't really, it's like, I liked the pattern initially because it's a lot of stockinette stitch, which is really nice. But then you get up to this lace pattern, which you probably can't see very well there, but it's a 1-to-1 cable. So you don't have to do the cable with the cable needle, but it takes a lot of like finessing. And I actually fractured my elbow like right at the beginning of this whole
Oh
quarantine.
my
I
God.
was running. I know. And it turns out with a broken elbow, you don't put it in a cast because if you immobilize it, then you'll never be able to move it. So basically, you just work through the pain. So it's been a lot of like knitting exploration for me. Like, how much pain can I work through here? It's my left arm, but you know, like you hold, you do kind of
Yeah.
when
Your
you're doing
stabilizer, like.
stuff. So I had to put that one aside after attempting and then like ripping out that cable part probably 3 or 4 times, ripped it out, and it just was like, forget it. And then I was starting to do this hat. I was signed up to take a class at Spun in March, so that didn't happen, sadly, to do a Fair Isle hat. So they wanted me to start with the ribbing. So I have the ribbing all set to go. And I have these really pretty colors here to go together. But now I don't have a pattern or I don't know what to do.
No.
So that was another standstill. So then I went back to a sweater that I was working on, and I wasn't happy with a few mistakes I'd made. So I ripped out the whole thing. So mostly I've been ripping out things.
Yeah.
I
I think about 30% of the knitting that I actually do is ripping out or frogging.
Yeah.
Roundabout.
Yeah. And that was something that's nice with this. Like, I don't normally, sometimes it takes time to sit down and actually rip out an entire thing.
Yes.
You know? And so that was something that I feel like was actually a constructive use of a big block of time, as sad as it was to do. So it's called the Millie sweater, and I'm doing it in this black yarn with a, I don't know how to show it. White, has like little white variegations in there somewhere.
Oh, that's
It's just a very basic sweater with kind of raglan. So it doesn't require tons of concentration. So it's working for me.
That's I have a short list of I think I'm hit the point knitting wise that I'm ready to start a sweater. And I have 5 or 6 different cropped sweaters that I want to try. And I just can't really decide which one I want. And I'm sitting here on the floor in my office and like laying out all these colors and thinking, oh, well, this one would be good. I don't have the perfect purple for this. How do I make this work? And wanting to like actually get started with that, but still being kind of trepidatious of like, I don't think that my color choices are perfect. So it's something that I'm going to eventually just have to get over and start. But it's that daunting idea of, I don't know that I'm actually ready to start a sweater. I know that I can do it, but I don't want to, I'm nervous to jump feet first into it because it's a big project. But
yeah, well, that's why I like this one. It's just one yarn, 2 skeins of it, and it's just basic. So it's like you're going to get a sweater out of it, but you don't have that kind of like, is this the right yarn? Is this the right pattern? All that commitment phobia.
That's good. I might have to see if I've got, because I don't have a lot of sweater quantities of yarn. I have single skeins of hand dyed, and I was trying to look at it of like, I don't want to buy yarn. I want to use what I already have. So doing what we were talking about last week of stash busting. So I have some yarns where I have like 2 skeins of fingering yarn, which is like 800 some odd yards, but I'm a 1 to 2x size, and that always requires more yarn. So I'm having to do more math than what I initially anticipated of how do I make this work. So I was setting up, I don't know why this reminded me of this, but I set up these charts of what sweater it was, what each of the colors were, and then how much yardage of each color you needed for each size of the sweater, so that I could kind of figure out what all do I have and what can I do with what I have based off of the sweaters that I want to do. So that was a weird amount of math and data entry that I didn't think that I would be willingly doing as an adult, but it's a work in progress, but still kind of one of those organization things that I really like to do. So
yeah, it's impressive.
I think now that we've gone through works in progress, we wanted to spend a good chunk of time today talking about Crafty toolkit. So the kind of skills and tools and techniques that are helpful for folks that are getting into crafting to know in advance, or for crafters who are already making things to kind of supplement or further learn more than what you already have. And crafty toolkits are going to be different for each different medium, but we were also going to talk about general crafting toolkits and things that it's good to know, or would be helpful in a large variety of things. So for me, the biggest things that have been helpful for me to get into multiple different types of crafting have been at least a basic knowledge of hand tools. So screwdrivers, pliers, wrenches, things like that. And also, oddly enough, being able to sketch and design and take an idea that I have in my head and put it onto paper. And then having the spatial imagination to take that and figure out what measurements do I need to take? How do I know how big to make this? How does this go together? So those are kind of abstract things for me that have helped me be a little bit more successful in a very wide range of things, plus an ability to kind of just like, let's take it apart and figure out how it works and then put it back together again. So that's been really helpful. But how about you guys? What has been some of your stuff that's in your crafting toolkit?
One thing I could say was you were talking about math. It's funny how much math you really do use as a crafter.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's a definite skill to keep in mind.
And when we're talking math, I've never used anything more than basic algebra or addition, subtraction, division. I think I've maybe used 2 different formulas, and that was the basic algebra, so it was like a y equals mx plus b type formula. And then, oh gosh, I can't remember what it was. It was like an equation to figure out how much a sweater would grow stitch-wise, or a scarf would grow stitch-wise, row by row, as you were going forward, because a lot of knitting patterns are written of like, you know, here's your row repeat, you're going to start, and then stitch or knit until you hit so many rows, but they don't tell you how many rows that is. They tell you go until you hit this stitch count. So I'm like, well, I don't know how many rows that is, so I'm going to have to write an equation to figure out exactly how many rows that is, so I know that I'm doing it correctly, and I can double check my stitch count as I go to make sure that I'm not missing a stitch on, like, if it's 90 rows of knitting, I haven't made a mistake on row 20, so that I can go through and keep track of it as I knit.
Yeah. I used to use a lot of math too with again, but going back to the days of pottery, because it shrinks and there's a different shrinkage rate depending on how high the item's going to fire. And if you're making something that has a lid, you got to like measure that it's going to fit in the well and that it won't, like, you know, shrink in and be like too tight. So there's a lot of things like that. And I use a lot of math too with drawing mandalas at some point, you know. Although with that recent program I did, it's so freeing just to use like everyday objects and not have all the compass and like the exacting of triangles and trying to measure everything out. I mean, sometimes there was a need for that, but it's kind of nice to just not make it so precise.
Yes, yeah.
So I guess math is in my toolkit. I don't know. What do you have, Lucy?
Well, I would say like 2 tools that I rely on, so I guess they're in my toolkit and would be good for anyone like starting out with a craft, or if you're in the middle of it. It's sort of a balance between finding content on the internet, or between a book. Like if you are trying to fix a mistake in knitting, or find a way to like, there's a certain increase that the sweater's asking for, and you're like, I can't remember, is make one left, do I go in the back, do I go in the front, you know. So it's I kind of go back and forth between quickly looking something up on the computer, or finding it in the back of a knitting book, you know. Sometimes I use those things in tandem, because I like to be really sure that I have a handle on what I'm doing. So it helps to see someone do it like on YouTube, but then also to be able to hold the book in front of you to remind you of what you're doing. So those are 2 things I would use a lot. And then like, as far as toolkit, I mean, in a much more literal sense, because the craft that I'm mostly doing right now is knitting, I would think of like the toolkit as what I always have in any knitting bag. And that would be like besides the yarn and the pattern and the needles that I'm knitting with, but always like a measuring tape, stitch markers available, and then like a crochet hook to help pick up drop stitches, stuff like that, scissors, and a notebook. So that would be like my literal toolkit for crafting.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because I went kind of in an abstract of like, what do you need to know before you're jumping into stuff? But there's very much like, there's a lot of overlap of the physical tools that you're going to be using for a lot of things. So for like a lot of the fiber art stuff that we do, scissors, needles, crochet hooks, smaller needles to do, you know, different needles of different sizes to do different things. So I carry all of those, and then like Lucy said, a measuring tape. I carry one of those in almost every crafting bag, just because at some point I'm going to need to measure something. But I'm also carrying like highlighter tape if I have a chart on a pattern that I need to follow a line for, and I need to know which line it is. I find that really helpful. And then I really like having a wide variety of mediums to work into. So different types of markers, colored pencils, different types of thread, embroidery floss, and a small variety of those things so that I at least have them. And then over time, I've accumulated multiple different other things, like a paper cutter, or I'm trying to actually like look around my crafting area to figure out what I have, like pliers that you can set plastic snaps with, wonder clips for sewing. So like a lot of the tools that I've accumulated over time have been helpful in a lot of other things. So like I'm finding, because I know what I want to make and what I have in my head, I'm always looking at what I have physically to see what tools do I need, or what can I use of what I already have to make what I need.
I think it's good to keep a freedom with what you have, to not compartmentalize it so much that like, this is for this thing, right? It can go for other things, or even when it comes to playing with colors, like just putting different things together and just see how you look at, you know, a couple colors together and you're like, these do not go together. But when you maybe lay them down on a piece of paper and they're next to each other with some other element, it plays differently. So it's you have that freedom to play and not have rules about things. It's kind of a toolkit item. No rules.
Yeah. I have a tendency to organize my stuff pretty compartmentalized. But I over time I've had to like not do that as much, because then I'll forget that I have a specific tool of like, if I'm doing something in sewing and I can't pull a needle hand sewing through fabric, then I have to dig out all my beading stuff because all my pliers are in with my beading stuff. So being able to have everything in kind of a central place, at least organized in a way that I know where it is and I can see it, helps me to more quickly find what I need. We talked about last week how for me this is a double-edged sword, because if I see too much of what I have, then I'm looking of like, oh, I haven't finished that project, or there's this project over there. So I'm kind of jumping around a lot. But no, I do think that crafting toolkit, there's a intangible and a tangible aspect of that, of like, what do you think is the most helpful for you to learn? Lucy brought up a really good point with knowing where to find resources is probably one of the most helpful intangible things that you can do, of like, if you start something and you run into a problem, knowing where to go to help, or some resource that's going to help you troubleshoot or figure out what went wrong, that for me helps prevent frustration, which then hits a point of like, I don't want to do this anymore, I'm going to stop doing it, or quit and never do it again or never touch it again. But knowing where to go for resources, I know I use Pinterest a lot, which is kind of a double-edged sword of like, sometimes it's good and sometimes it's bad. But then resources at the library, just pulling 3 or 4 different books on a certain topic off the shelf and flipping through them really quick, seeing if I'm visually finding anything that I'm looking for. And YouTube. Especially over the last 3 years with self-teaching knitting and a lot of other sewing stuff, I'm finding everything I need on YouTube. And
that's amazing too. You can sometimes like Google what your problem is that you're having, and you can find other people are having that common experience. It's like, oh, I'm not alone. I'm not a total idiot about this. Somebody else has had this trouble, and they're showing you then how to fix that. So that's really great. It's a nice relief. Definitely Pinterest is great, but yeah, it can be a hole you fall down of distraction of other things, and you're like, I don't even want to do that project now. I'm going to go over and do this thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's very easy for me to do. But the community aspect of crafting, especially looking at online, I really love, and I think that that's really great. There's always resources you can go to, whether you like just reading blogs, or you want to go to YouTube, or you want to look for articles that are written on either like Instructables or WikiHow. There's tons of different types of resources depending on whatever your learning style is or whatever your personal preference is, for finding those kind of resources. Plus,
Yeah, I was gonna say there's so many different things because it does depend on learning style. It's kind of like you have to find what works for you.
yes.
Yeah, because there are a lot of options out there. Sometimes a craft blog is what's gonna help you understand something, or like you say, how you just need like basic step by step. So
Mm-hmm. That's, I think, my biggest frustration though with crafting blogs is to make them viable methods. So a lot of folks that are working from home that are running crafting blogs, they have to then open it up to ad revenue, and it becomes just this slogging through 20, 30, 40 different ads on this poor person's blog of like, I can't find the information I'm looking for because I have to jump over all of these different page breaks and ads and just going down and down and down. So a lot of times if I find something that I like and it's a resource that I want to save for later, I copy the text of the article and some of the pictures and then the URL of where I got it from and the name of the blog into a Word document, and I save that on my cloud, whether that's Google Drive or OneDrive, whatever you're using, because if it's something that I want to refer back to over and over again, or like a method or a technique or something, I'm just going to be annoyed by looking at all that. And because it's for my own personal use, I'm keeping all of that information of who created it and where to find it, but it's also keeping it for my own personal records, which I find very helpful. That and printing off patterns and having several of them in a binder of like, and now I know exactly where to look for it, so I don't have to Google and then skim through what I'm looking for. So building that personal library has been really helpful for me. And it's also just, I just enjoy doing that. Pattern collecting is a big thing, so.
Yeah, I do a lot of that. I mean, I have so many patterns. I think also the ability to have them somewhere where you can print them is really nice, because I am, with my patterns, it's like when I'm using a pattern to knit, I am just marking all over that thing, and inevitably it's like folded up, it tucked in my bag. And so like when I go to do it again, sometimes I'll use that same pattern. It's something that's kind of like interesting about it with all those markations, but sometimes you're like, I just got to start fresh. So it's nice if you have those somewhere where you can make multiples, or have one that's like your master copy and then one that you can just totally destroy. It's like a cookbook, like you can go through a cookbook, tell which recipes you've used because they're the ones that have like the splatter on them, and or maybe I'm just revealing a lot about the way that I use cookbooks and patterns.
No, I worked in a commercial kitchen for a couple years, and that was a very real thing of like, yes, the recipes are laminated. They're still disgusting. Like that's still, you're still splashing things, and it's, happens. But no, that's, and my cookbooks at home are like that. Some of them have smudges on them. They're in plastic plastic holders, whatever, page protectors, that's what they are. But they're still messy. But that was actually why I started a knitting journal, was because I wanted to keep the pattern. This is so weird. The pattern gets beat up enough in my bag. I didn't want to like make it that much worse by taking, and a lot of times on those pages, there's not enough room for me to take notes. So I started a knitting journal so that I could track my own notes and then save them onto Ravelry so that I would have them digitally too. And I'm finding myself with a lot of the sewing projects that I'm working on of like, I wish that there was that same resource, or there was that same method to save my notes. Or I'm just going to have to take better notes or make a sewing journal or something that will save all of that information for if I wanted to do it again. We've talked a little bit about in the past of how being home, or on last episode, how being at home has changed our crafting habits and how we've adjusted. We wanted to talk a little bit more about that in regards to how being home has affected the projects that we're picking, and how we're prioritizing things.
Because we're not knowing how much time we have
Mm-hmm.
being in this position, there's kind of like this mild anxiety about like, well, what's the thing to get involved with? You know, do you want to take on something big, or, you know, are you going to have regrets? Like I was talking about, I may have a regret that like, why did I work on picking up new projects like weaving and things like that when I could have continued to finish some of my other things? So it's been difficult to really, I guess, to have focus and to know how to use your time best. It's like you just have this fantasy of, oh, I just want to be at home and I have all this time to just sit and knit, and it's like, but you don't, because, oh, I got to go clean something, or there's, you know, other people at home and they're asking for your attention or their distractions. So yeah, and kind of, Lucy, you were hitting on that a little bit before earlier when we were talking.
Yeah, just even like the time that you know, you imagine, oh, I have unlimited time to do these things, but then the reality of now is it's actually not really unlimited.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just like hours upon hours of use, or in my house, of me sitting by myself and doing this project, you know, because there are other things that have to be done, or people's needs that, you know, like other people in your house that need the space that you're in, or are just doing something different. So it's not like it's not how I imagined it would be to have all this time
Mm-hmm.
to craft. And then there's this, I find this pressure of like, is this the time when, you know, it's like, it's almost like you have this bucket list in your head, like because it's like, what would I do if I had all these days? And so it's like, well, I would learn this, I would try this new thing, I would, you know, learn how to make crepe paper leaves or something, you know. It's just like, but then when it comes down to it, it's like what you're saying is, do I want to do that, or do I want to, is this the time for me to finish that thing? You know, do I want to add more unfinished projects to my already big pile of unfinished projects? So yeah, and I don't think it's just, I just think focus right now it's just a challenge across the board in all aspects of life. And I think that seems to be a common thing with other people that I've talked to as well. It's just like,
I feel like the days have gone by pretty quickly in a way, you know,
more so than I thought they would.
Yeah,
definitely. That's it's the days go by way faster than what I anticipated, because like we talked about earlier, you know, when at the first outset of this, it was like, oh my god, we have all this time. That's awesome. What am I going to do with it? So like I prioritized of, you know, over the course of time, I was starting all of these projects and then never finishing them. So my priority walking in was finishing my works in progress list or unfinished projects, or trying to kind of clean up some of the things that I had already started. And I'm still running into problems of like, yes, but this other thing has come up that I need to do before that other project. Or I'm having, now that I'm home and have all of this time, the folks in my family and my friends who know that I'm crafty and know that I have all this time are asking me to do things. And it's kind of that balance of, how do I still help while finishing the things that I want to do? And then now that we've been in this for a while and I've been home for a while, I'm kind of starting to see a little bit of an end point of, I'm going to end up having to go back to work and won't have all this time at home sometime as soon as 2 weeks from now. So how do I reprioritize what I need to do in order to finish what I want to finish and still be ready to go back to work, and ready for life to go back to as normal as it can be, of a 40-hour work week stuff. So I'm still kind of figuring out that balance of what that looks like, but no, it's not what I anticipated at all of, you know, what that's going to look like. But
yeah, I'm just trying to do like smaller things in a way that's kind of nice to be like, well, I am going to try out weaving, you know, doing the cardboard loom weaving, something I haven't really played with, or playing with paper mache, where it's like no real big commitment, but it's like, I've kind of played with the idea and now I can set it aside and go back to it later. Like I understand what my skills are with that if I ever want to go back into it, what it's going to entail. So it's been nice to just kind of dabble in things. I do have a project for my mother-in-law that I've been working on for probably, I don't know, 8 months or something now with my paper embroidery. I have one more to finish, and I could have finished it 8 times over. And instead I'm working on developing a new paper embroidery pattern instead of just working with what I have.
Yeah.
So
And, I just remembered something that Lucy brought up of like a bucket list of things to learn. I actually did that. My partner and I, when I first came home, it was like, we're going to have a little bit of time together and we want to carve out a little bit of time where we do something together at least every other day. So we made a short list of like, we wanted to learn some basic sign language, and he wanted to
my
learn
list too. Yeah.
So yeah, and that was, we've picked up a little bit of basic sign language. And that has been really fun. He wanted me to teach him how to hand sew. And that's been really fun for us to work on a project together and for me to teach him how to do that. And playing with, we will regularly play with like painting and coloring and, more basic things that are most adults consider like, oh, that's a kid's project or that's a child's project, because it helps break up the seriousness of being an adult and having to do adult things like going to the grocery store and having to figure out how you're going to go to the bank and pay your bills when the bank is closed. It adds a little bit of levity, I think, to our days and kind of makes things a little bit more fun instead of having to be serious. But yeah. And then refreshing of old skills for me, I picked up, like Heidi said, it's easier for me to pick up smaller projects or do bigger projects in smaller doses, and refreshing the skills that I already have. So like I pulled out some of my beading stuff and was doing a little bit more jewelry making before I recorded the video that airs today, I think, actually. So today is Friday, April
10th.
Thank you. So today is the 10th. It's going to be airing today. So I picked up some stuff to kind of remember that or refresh that skill before I shot that video. And then with the hand sewing that I'm teaching my partner, I haven't hand sewn anything that's not embroidery in a good 10 years. So doing that all again has been really interesting. And the first 15 minutes of it, I'm like, oh my God, I'm terrible at this. This is going really badly. But it was still fun to kind of relearn that and get that muscle memory back.
There's like no better way to learn your skill than to be teaching it to somebody else.
Yeah, yes,
absolutely.
We've talked about that several times on our own, just between the three of us. Of it really helps solidify the your own favorite way of doing things when you're trying to explain it to somebody else, and kind of figuring out exactly how that works. For me, it was the first time I realized that was when I was teaching people to knit. Because for a long time I didn't really fully understand exactly how knitting works and what this sounds really abstract and unimportant, but like how the fabric is made, how the yarn interacts with itself, why it does what it does, why it forms the way it forms. That was really interesting to me because I fully didn't understand it. Like I understood it with crochet, but by teaching folks, I got more of an understanding of how it works and how it should work. So.
Yeah. Well, I think when you're showing someone, there's the visual aspect of showing them, and then you also have to find the right words to use to explain what you're doing. And I think that sometimes is where it like clicks with your own what your skill set is, because you're like, how do I describe what I'm doing? Like I can see what I'm doing. How do I talk about it? So
yes, exactly. So I think we've covered just about everything that we wanted to cover. We are running right towards the end of our time together. So is there anything else you guys wanted to talk about, or anything else that we've missed?
I think we covered what we wanted to today. I think it was nice to chat about these things and just to share a common experience, common frustration, and commiserate how normal that is, I guess, the normalizing.
Yeah. I know, it's kind of good to talk to people and not have any person be like, well, I made a sweater and I did this and I mean, like accomplishment is great, but it's also good to know that everyone is sort of in that boat of like, how do I structure my time? So
yeah, and that I'm a lot of because I do listen to some podcasts and blogs that are crafting related, of everybody talking. Some of the folks are talking about, I'm finishing all this stuff and I started this project and I finished it a week later, and I'm just like, that's not the experience that I'm having. Can we talk about how this may be a little bit more difficult for folks? So I'm really glad for the opportunity to be able to talk about how this changes things and how things have changed and what that looks like for everybody, and kind of get that commemoration of like, we're all in this together and like we're going through the same things. So
it's nice to keep the focus on it being play.
Right.
You know, and more about sometimes even just the process, you know, like the other night when I had to re-ball my yarn. So now I'm working with the yarn from the outside to the inside, because there was just some really messed up tangle in there that it was just, you know, a mega yarn barf. And I'm like, okay. And it was 2 hours of just reworking so I could use the yarn. So I had to re-ball it. I'm like, well, process. Just playing with my yarn, not in the way I thought I was going to play with it, but
and that's as much respect as I have for side hustle culture, and that idea that you should always have a side project and it should be serious. Having that capacity to play with it and to as a sense of self-expression for me, and a way to kind of manage my stress, it's much easier for me to kind of look at this as a play, fun thing, than to look at this as a seriousness of like, I have to make this marketable or valuable by somebody else's standards. So that helps me a lot. But no, thank you guys so much for joining us for this video. Thank you, Heidi and Lucy, for being in for this conversation. We hope that folks have enjoyed it. Leave us a comment down below if you'd like to see us talk about anything else, or if you have any insight, or if you want to continue the conversation in the comments section. We'll be checking in periodically to kind of talk with you guys and be there for you. Hope everybody's staying safe, happy, and healthy during this time. And have a great day.
Don't forget to like our video.
Yes, like our video, subscribe to the channel. And check out some of the other videos that the library's been creating for crafting and interaction. There is a cat and dog meetup that we did through Zoom that's very fun. So check that out definitely. But have a great day. Bye.
Bye.